So how does Visual Studio App Center implement continuous everything so that we can seek continuous happiness? Well, first of all, we have a dashboard that lists all of our apps. And then I'm going to pop open the sidebar here by clicking on the hamburger. And this shows the All Apps filter. And then there are companies. Right now we have Acme and Lexicon Systems, which is my company, and Tyrell Corporation. And so I'm going to drill down into my company, and there's 3 of them here. Within Lexicon Systems, you see you can look at your apps. You can have people that are collaborators for that organization. And then you can also manage that organization and change information about it. So I'm going to go back to the apps. And there's a few apps here. And you can first of all see that there are 2 different OSs, iOS and Android. And so I'm going to first go into the Acquaint app, which is a Xamarin Template app. And this brings us over to the next view, which is the app overview. I'm going to pop that open with the hamburger. And here we have all kinds of things. First of all, there's Getting Started, which is about the Mobile Center SDK. That's for much later in this conversation. For today, we'll be talking about build, test, and distribute, which you should recall from our earlier conversations. Build, test, and distribute are, and this is probably the most important thing to understand about App Center, they are aggregations, they're sort of wrapped or re-implementations of existing fantastic tools. Build is a re-implementation of Visual Studio Team System, that it is powered by Visual Studio Team System. It's also powered by the Mac operating system. When we compile an iOS app, we need a Mac on the network somewhere. And so within the build capability for iOS apps, it is compiling your app on Macs that are in the cloud for you. Then there's Test, which is an implementation of Test Cloud, which used to be Xamarin Test Cloud. Now we call it Test Cloud. And this is a product that's been around for a couple of years. It's tried and true. It's a really amazing product. And we'll drill down in just a minute. Distribute is an implementation of, guess what? Hockey App, a cross-platform distribution platform. So when we talk about wanting to be able to take a single application and then run it through continuous integration and continuous deployment, first we need to be able to build that app. And so when you build that app, you want to be able to pull code. So we need to connect to a repo. Now I've already connected this app to my GitHub repo. I took this and forked this application and downloaded it. And then I have it here in my own repo. And so these are the branches that are available within that GitHub repo. If we go up into Open on GitHub, you can see it here at my repo. It's called Acquaint. This is from the Xamarin template. And we have all the code here and all the documentation about this particular app template. Branches master. Now, I've already built this, and so a lot of what you're going to see in the next few minutes are things that are already done and already completed. Later in the course, we'll talk about how you can do it for yourself. But if we look at the settings for this, I'm going to pop it open. You can see that it's accessing the iOS project for Acquaint. You can see that you can set up configuration. There's build types for devices or simulators. Then you can even talk about, we mentioned earlier, we can sign the builds. You can have it test on a real device using Test Cloud to make sure that your build didn't fail, and then you can get into distribution. So see here, you can change these things and then build it on the fly. So if we drill down into the build itself, or the branch rather, then we can see all the builds that have happened on this branch. And so again, look at the settings for those. This is another way to get to them. This is the great thing about App Center, is that there are various workflows for every single thing that you might want to do, for every field that you might want to edit, for every functionality that you might want to try. There are usually a couple of ways to get at that, depending upon where you are within the app. Very handy. And so when you do a build, you get a build output, and so that you can see how it went, and if there was a problem with it, you can see exactly what that problem was. And when it succeeds and you have distribution set up, you can then distribute it. It has to be signed. This one's not. You can then download it. We can download the artifacts for this particular build and then do whatever you want with them. So that's build. After you have your build, then it's time to do some testing. Go over to the testing icon here on the left bar, and here we're using what's called Test Cloud, formerly Xamarin Test Cloud. And you can set up a new test run, and you're immediately presented with the devices that you may want to be able to test on. And you can select the devices that you'd like to run your tests for. I'm going to pick an iPhone 6s Plus, iPhone 7. You select these devices, and then you're faced with having to test, having to select the series, the language, and then the framework. And here's the language in which you use, the script language in which you use to write the tests themselves. So yeah, there is a little work involved in producing tests before you can run them. And so a lot of us use Xamarin.UI test for Xamarin work. A lot of folks use Calabash, and then we have other options as well. At this point, you need to install Mobile Center command line interface in order to upload the tests. I won't do this at this step. We'll cover that a little later in the course, but you upload those tests and then it allows you to run those tests and then view the results here in the test runs. There's a handy feature called device sets, which allows you to create collections of device sets. Here we're going to set a name, my iPhones, and then you can collect a couple of particular iPhones and create that device set. And so then you can use that in the future just so that you won't have to select every single device every single time you want to run the test. So that's test in a nutshell. After you test, then when you're satisfied with it, you want to be able to get it out to your other testers, and you want to perhaps get it out to stakeholders or users, maybe even other developers. You may even want to get it into the store. And at this point, we're talking about distribution. And so the distribute feature, App Center Distribute, allows you to do these things. And so the first thing I'm going to do is switch over to another operating system of this app. So before we were working with iOS, I'm now going to switch over to Android and back to Distribute. And the first thing that we have here are our groups. So the options here are groups, stores, and releases. So the groups are collections of collaborators that you can send your app out to, your build out to. And so we can look at that group, and you can see that it has these particular testers. You send out invites, and if testers aren't slacking, they respond and get on this list. And these folks do have to be, they do have to have logins within App Center. So within a distribution group, when we select releases, we can then see the releases that have gone out to that distribution group, which is handy. When you're ready to send out a new distribution, that is, release a new build to your groups or to an individual, you distribute new release. And we have two options here. You can either upload your signed APK, it has got to be signed, or you can choose branch and build, which is a lot handier. And if you have already configured your builds to be pre-signed, then you can go ahead and use the branch and build that you have pre-signed, in which case we have some out there already that I had done earlier. And then you have release notes, and you want to type in. Of course, that's never the case, but that's what we have there for an example. And then we go ahead and distribute it. And when it gets distributed, it goes out in the form of emails that get sent out to all of the people on the distribution groups. So your collaborators will receive the email, and then they can download the application, the particular build. and it tells them the version number. Now, obviously, I'm on a Windows device, but if we were on an Android device, it would allow, this download button would be active, and we could download that app onto our Android device, run it, and test it. And that's distribution to your testers. Eventually, they're going to sign off on that, and you're going to be ready to release this into the store. And so here within distribution, we have stores. You can add a connection, and we're presented with Google Play and Intune Company Portal. When we're ready to release your Android app into the Google Play Store, you're going to need a security token, which you need to get from the Google Play Developer Console. And so once you have that, you can enter that here, and then it will allow you to upload your new version of this build. I mean, in a nutshell, you really have to release your initial build into the store yourself, and then after that, you can then release updates using this process. And that is the App Center Distribute workflow.